Hello, sociology students. So, today we're going to be covering Henslin chapter 4. So, this is looking at social structure and social interaction. Now, a way to look at this is an old philosophical divide or way of understanding things in terms of form versus content. And so, the social structure exists as a kind of form or framework for society, and there are major components that make up the social structure we'll get to in just a moment. Social interaction would be the content or how people actually interact within the social structure itself. What kind of communication do they engage in? How do they act in particular roles? These kinds of things. So, our attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors are all connected to where we exist within the social structure. So think back when we were talking about values in chapter 2 in the chapter on culture. And we talk about how our beliefs, our attitudes, our values all come from our cultural background. Well, our cultural background is going to be different, even growing up in the same society, if you're growing up in a different area of society or a different part of the social structure. And so, even if you're growing up in the same society as someone else, it doesn't mean you're going to be growing up in the same background, especially somebody who is growing up in poverty versus somebody who's growing up in wealth and abundance. There's going to be very different sets of behaviors, attitudes, beliefs, values coming out of those different backgrounds. So, as I said, we get to the major components of social structure. The major components of social structure are culture, which we just covered a whole class on it. Social class. Social class would be a large number of people who have the similar income, education, and work jobs with roughly the same income and prestige. All right. So notice that social class is defined by several variables. Income, prestige, education are the main ones. Number three, the third part of social structure are people's social statuses. There are many different aspects to it. Status itself is the position that someone occupies in a social group, the amount of respect they're given, the amount of privilege they're given in a given social group. And this could be based on any number of different things. It could be based on larger collective kinds of factors. It could be based on more individual factors. We all occupy multiple statuses. And so within one social group, we might be really well respected, while in another social group, we might be highly disrespected. And so we have very different social statuses, and all of them put together would be what we would refer to in sociology as a status set. And so that's all the different statuses you occupy at the same time. Now, there's some other aspects to status as well. Ascribe status. The key thing you want to clue into there is scribe, something written. Ascribed means it's written onto you. And so the ascribed status is written onto the individual that's either inherited at birth or later in life. Um, And so ascribed status is something that is involuntary. It's something that you can't help. So a classic example would be Nathaniel Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter, right? Or Hester Prynne has to wear the Scarlet Letter A over her dress. And so the colony she lives in just ascribed her status as an adulteress with that letter. Then we have achieve status, which is effectively what it sounds like. It's the status you achieved at some point in your life that you actually went for. It could be occupational, it could be educational. You are all, when you graduate and get your bachelor's degrees, will see a rise in your overall achieved status because you just became more educated. And an educational institution gave you a degree to mark that occasion. All right. Then we have master status. Master status is a status that people refer to as being your dominant status. It's not what you think your master status is, it's what other people think your master status is. So, for instance, quick example, if I say I'm going to see a doctor, what gender do you immediately picture? Most people picture a man. And I still, to this day, the 21st century, there's plenty of doctors who are also just happen to be women. But you'll hear people say things like, "Oh, I'm going to see a doctor. It's a woman doctor. It's a woman doctor." Well, why do you have to say, if it's a man doctor, you don't say it's a man doctor, you just say doctor. Well, what that tells you is that doctor is the subordinate status and woman is the master status in that, and they see the doctor being a woman as being more important than her credentials as a doctor. Status inconsistency. Status inconsistency is a part of being occupying multiple statuses and different statuses within your overall status set. This is when you rank high on some statuses, low on some others. And it's also called status discrepancy. Roles. I've been talking about roles. Roles are the fourth part of social structure. You occupy a status, you play a role. And so, role would be typically defined by relationships. Professor student, those are two roles. A mother child, two roles. Father child, two roles. Any of the familial positions, uncle, aunt, nephew, niece, cousin, those are all roles. Any occupation that title that you have, that's a role. Um, Things that you do is in terms of hobbies, the groups that you join, those are all roles. The different groups of friends that you have, and most people don't just have one group of friends, but more than one group of friends, and they end up being a little bit different with the different groups. They don't all act always the same. And it's not that people are being disingenuous or inauthentic. It's simply that different roles demand different things of you. And it's not that you're lying, it's that these are different aspects of self. And humans are very complex, and no one role is going to allow you to express all that you are. And so we end up having multiple roles because society demands it of us, but also it allows us to express different aspects of the self. And instead of, because well, you act one way with one group and a different way with a different group, doesn't mean you're a hypocrite or inauthentic. It just means you're expressing different parts of yourself with different groups. And everyone does it, even if you are so unaware of yourself that you think you act the same regardless. I assure you, you act differently with different people depending on who they are in the social context. All right, the fifth, groups, social groups that you belong to. These are people who see themselves as having something in common with one another and therefore group together socially as a result. So it's your social group. And we don't typically belong to just one social group, we belong to multiple social groups. And then that's the fifth thing, group, social groups. The sixth thing, social institutions. That's the last one. So, social institutions themselves. Now, institutions, as I've said in earlier videos, are any kind of formal organization of human interaction. The social institution is how social needs are met. They end up establishing standard procedures and policies and ways of achieving certain goals within a society. There are 10 major institutions in the United States. Make sure you take a look at the 10. Just to list them quickly, would be family, religion, education, economy, medicine, politics, law, science, military, and number 10, mass media. Now, those are the 10 major institutions in the US specifically at this point in history. If we were to go back in time, it would be different. If we were to look at a different culture, it would be different. All right. Now, as you might have guessed, Functionalist and conflict theorists, remember the two big macro theories in sociology, have very different ways of evaluating and analyzing institutions and what institutions do. So let's look at the functionalist first. Functionalists argue that every society has five functional requisites, or five required things that a society must do in order for that society to function. The first one is replacing members. Now, this could be through biological reproduction, this could be through immigration, it could be achieved through multiple means. Biological reproduction is not the only way a society replaces its members. Number two, socializing new members. So you have to socialize, teach the culture, teach the social expectations of the different roles within this given society. All the different things that we talked about in chapter 3 that go into socialization. Number 3, you need to be able to create systems that produce and distribute goods and services. How are you going to make sure that your people have food, water, a place to sleep at night, etc.? Or are you going to? Are you just going to um, give up on your people and violate the civil order by not caring if people have number 4, preserving order. Preserving order can be accomplished in multiple ways. The main way that it's accomplished is actually through informal social sanctions. Think about it, if somebody's acting unsocially, typically other people in the situation, by the way they react to them, can get them to change their behavior. There's no need to call in the police and the military. But the police and the military as institutions serve as this idea of preserving order for those who benefit from the kind of order that is provided by police and the military. The fifth thing for the functional requisites is providing a sense of purpose. This is arguably one of the most important things that a society can do, is give people a reason to get out of bed in the morning, give them a reason to keep going on with life. There's a reason why Emil Durkheim ended up arguing that the suicide rate in a given society is directly related to the overall health of that society. If people don't have a sense of purpose, you're not going to have a society for very long. Now, functionalists all argue that institutions provide these things, and they do largely. Institutions provide all of these things. Now, conflict theorists don't necessarily disagree with that. And again, keep in mind that the different theories are all looking at similar data. It's a question of their interpretation of it. And remember the parable of the blind man and the elephant. Each one is giving us a different aspect of how these kinds of things work. So, conflict theorists argue that institutions end up maintaining the status quo. And this is absolutely correct. I mean, institutions are bureaucracies, and the very point of the bureaucracy is to protect itself and to maintain its existence in for perpetuity, for the foreseeable future. And bureaucracies are very slow to change policy and procedures. Um, and bureaucracies tend to stay around for a long time, even if they're no longer needed. And so, in that sense, then, institutions will always perpetuate the values that were used to establish those institutions. So they might change policies and procedures over time, over an extended period of time, but the core norms and social order that was trying to be preserved originally in the foundation of the institution is going to be preserved throughout the institution's history. Therefore, institutions from a conflict perspective are always conservative, not in the sense of Republicans and Democrats, are conservative and liberal. I'm not even using the word liberal correctly in the sense of liberal philosophy and the way we use it in American politics. but it's in terms of actually conserving aspects of the past and present, into the future, and that's what institutions do. And institutions, since they are set up by groups that are the most powerful within a society, who are capable of establishing and setting up institutions, the values and norms and expectations of the most powerful of a given society are concretized or preserved within the major institutions of those societies. So, conflict theorists see institutions as systems of controlling the disempowered within society. Now, all societies, given enough time, will change. So, how does a society stay together even if it's changing?